Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. My name is Evan Cross. I'm 37, a financial analyst in Denver. Sunday night, the kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and lemon, and I was at the dining table with my laptop open, finishing a client reconciliation. Nothing dramatic, just end-of-week numbers and the soft tick of the wall clock. She moved through the house in a new dress that looked expensive without trying. Lately, everything she touched looked that way. 2 months ago, our budget worked like a well-oiled machine. We'd mapped out the mortgage, savings goals, the vacation fund. I built the sheet. She liked checking off the boxes. Then the event started. First, a wellness day that somehow cost $300 for cold plunge access and kombucha. Then a weekend Femme Leadership Summit, hotel not included. After that, concerts she never used to care about. Seats so close you could count the stitches on the band's jackets. The calendar was suddenly full of experiences, and each one burned a neat hole through the ledger I kept in the cloud. The credit card alerts hit my phone at odd hours. $127. $419. $1,249. Boutique charges from places with names that sounded like candle scents. I told myself it was a phase. I turned off the alerts for a week, then turned them back on when I realized pretending wasn't the same as fixing. I asked about it in small ways. Big weekend? She smiled without looking up from her phone. Just making connections. Which, as explanations go, didn't connect to anything. I tried again a few days later, more direct. We're a little hot on discretionary this month. A nod, a shrug, a kiss on the cheek on her way out to a panel. She started using words like investment and network, and later we'll make it back. Money isn't everything, she'd add, usually right after spending it. The packaging changed at home. Boxes with magnetic lids, crinkled paper you could mistake for fabric, heavy cards tucked inside that said things like welcome to the circle in copper foil. She hid some of the bags in the guest closet and didn't bother hiding others. I noticed both. That's my job, noticing. During lunch one day, I opened the bank app and stared at a $1,200 charge from a company I'd never heard of, Empower Edge Seminars LLC, with a location in Miami. I did the normal thing. Clicked through, checked the category, took a breath, closed the app. That Sunday, she came down the stairs in that dress, heels dangling from one hand, hair already done like she was headed for a camera instead of dinner. I had set plates on the table, 2 glasses, nothing fancy. I closed the laptop and let the screen glow fade. Can we talk about the budget for a minute? I kept my tone even, the way I speak to clients when the numbers tell a story they don't want to hear. We're running hot. Savings has flattened. If we keep this pace, the vacation fund becomes theoretical. She stopped at the counter and checked herself in the reflection of the microwave. I'm meeting friends at the hotel bar before the keynote. It's a networking thing. I nodded. I'm not saying don't go. I'm saying it's stacking up. Miami last week. The tickets. The salon. The dress? The smile came quick and then cooled. I work too, Evan. I'm allowed to enjoy what I earn. I'm not disputing that. I just want us aligned. These are not small spends, and they're happening fast. If we care about the future we've planned. Numbers, numbers, numbers. She slid the heels on with one practiced movement and checked her phone. You always make it sound like a courtroom. I don't want to be cross-examined every time I do something for myself. I let that sit for a beat. It's not cross-examination. It's partnership. We chose goals. We were building something. Her laugh was light and dry. We? You chose spreadsheets. I chose experience. Different values. That's all. I stood, not to loom, just to be at eye level. We can have both. We just have to track the pace. If we keep draining savings to fund weekends, the pace wins and the plan loses. She capped her lipstick, set it down, and finally looked straight at me as if seeing a person who'd wandered into a room she'd rented by the hour. The silence wasn't hostile. It was indifferent. When she spoke, it wasn't a shout, not even a hiss. It was simple, polished, like a line she'd tried out on someone else first and liked the way it felt in her mouth. I don't need your approval. A pause, then the smallest shrug, like flicking lint from a sleeve. The gesture landed harder than the words. She tucked the phone into a clutch, glanced at the table I'd set, and stepped around me as if I were a coat rack. Perfume, the click of a clasp, the front door opening to the soft corridor light. After the door closed, The house did that thing houses do when they choose sides. It gave her footsteps back to me as echoes, and then swallowed the rest. I sat down again, opened the laptop, not to work, but to stare at the white glow until my eyes stopped trying to fill in the blanks on their own. The garlic and lemon cooled. The clock kept decent time. I went back through the accounts with slower hands. The seminar. The salon subscription that had doubled. The automatic charge for a collective I didn't know we'd joined. I clicked the calendar we used to share and found color blocks I didn't recognize. Her entries had their own tone now, like she was writing a separate life in the margins. We used to sit here on Sundays and plan. Flights we could afford. A kitchen reno we both wanted. Those notes were still there, ghosted gray by time. What surprised me most wasn't anger. It was the size of the space that opened in my head as soon as the sentence was spoken. I don't need your approval. It rearranged the room without moving a single chair. In that space, I checked something I hadn't looked at in a long time. The emergency contacts on my phone. I changed one. Not a statement. A sensible adjustment. I looked up the guest closet and counted the boxes without opening them. I closed the door gently. Back at the table, I took the plates away and put the food into containers. Small, precise motions that made sense. It would have been easy to send a flurry of texts while she posted photos next to a branded backdrop. Easy to argue, to make a case, to win a debate she had already ended. Instead, I washed 2 glasses, dried them, and put them back where they belonged. The math continued to do what math does. Add, subtract, reveal. The story wrote itself line by line across the cells. I didn't need a speech. I needed the next number. If I wasn't part of the choice, I wouldn't be part of the future either. That thought landed as quietly as a receipt printing behind a counter. One more strip of paper in a pile you ignore until the drawer won't close. I closed the laptop. The clock ticked. The house kept its neutrality. And somewhere downtown, a room filled with people clapped for something that sounded like freedom. I let the sound arrive without me. The week after she said it, the tempo changed. The spinning didn't slow. It accelerated like I'd hit the gas by pointing at the gauge. New charges stacked in tidy rows. $89 for a member's circle, $640 for a stylist refresh, $310 at a champagne brunch where the photos looked like an ad for a different life. Captions started appearing under her posts. Live unapologetically. Protect your energy. Choose yourself first. Phrases that fit neatly beneath filtered light and the shoulders of women I'd never met. At home, the air turned performative. She dressed for the house like the house might be watching. Music from playlists I didn't recognize, sent diffusers with names that sounded like commandments. I cooked simple food. She grazed and left. When I asked for 5 minutes to look at the numbers together, she checked the mirror instead. The shrug became punctuation. It ended more sentences than periods did. I tried precision. We're spending above plan by 31% across discretionary. It isn't a feeling, it's math. She rolled her lipstick between her fingers and smiled like I'd told a story from childhood. Money is a tool, Evan. You treat it like a religion. She wasn't angry. Anger I understand. This was dismissal. It slides off anything you say and lands at your feet like you dropped it on purpose. Her friends multiplied. Names I'd never heard were suddenly fixtures. Voices on speakerphone, tags and stories, hands on her shoulders in group photos taken at doorways that didn't look like ours. They spoke in the same cadence, a chorus of women who were always heading somewhere important. When I asked what the event actually was, she said connection. When I asked what connection cost, she said opportunity. We were having 2 different conversations in the same room. On Wednesday, she told me she couldn't make dinner because one of the keynote speakers was hosting an after-salon. I said we'd planned the mortgage appointment Thursday morning. Sleep helps with decisions you'll live with for 30 years. She laughed and said I sounded like a brochure for adulthood. The appointment came. She texted that she was running behind and arrived 40 minutes late with sunglasses on and coffee in a cup that cost more than lunch. The broker did her job. I did mine. We nodded through numbers that would never fit if the pace continued. On the way out, in the parking garage, I spoke plainly. Are you trying to build a life? Or just burn one down because the smoke looks good in pictures? She slid her glasses into her hair and gave me the same line, handled like jewelry. I don't need your approval. Friday was a couple's birthday dinner. Long table, platter, the kind of place where the waitstaff bend at the knees to pour water. A friend asked whether I still did all those spreadsheets, like I was a hobbyist with a trained set. Before I could answer, she said, "He tracks receipts like they're confessions, and everyone laughed the way people laugh when they're happy it's not about them." I didn't take the bait. I paid the bill and tipped well because the service was good. Back home, I stood in the kitchen while she posted a carousel and thought about how silence can be mistaken for weakness until it isn't. The pressure wasn't drama. It was erosion, one edge of partnership shaved off each day. Small plans stopped being plans. They became placeholders in case she felt like it. She started coming home late and leaving early, shoes in hand, the front door a revolving prop. When I asked what time to expect her, I got the weather report. Depends. If I suggested a weekend hike, she said her group had a day retreat that would be healing. If I asked how much it cost, she asked why I was trying to control her. I didn't explode. I spoke. We agreed on savings goals. We agreed on the renovation sequence. We agreed on the timeline for paying off the car. These aren't my goals. They're ours. She tilted her head and called me rigid, which is another word for accountable when you don't like the text underneath the photo. Later, I found my name removed from the shared calendar entries that used to hold our Sundays. Her blocks were still there, bright as festival wristbands. She started testing narratives outside our home. A mutual friend asked me over coffee if everything was okay, because she'd heard I'd become tight-fisted and controlling. I opened my phone and showed him a single month's screenshots. Nothing sensational, just lines and totals and the slope that points downhill. He looked, cleared his throat, and changed the subject. People prefer their friendships frictionless. Data adds grit. At night, she'd come in buzzing from whatever talk or tasting she'd attended, buzzing enough that the house seemed small around her. I'd be reading or finishing an analysis. She'd drop a gift bag on the counter like a challenge coin. I tried once more with the softest entry. "Do you actually like these events, or do you like being seen at them?" She didn't pause. "Does it matter? You'll audit it either way." Not anger. Just a woman who had learned that attention feels like love until the bill arrives. I kept my voice low and my sentences short. "I'm not your jailer. I'm your husband. Wanting visibility on thousands of dollars isn't control. It's stewardship." She posted a story about old frameworks right after and tagged a speaker whose job, near as I could tell, was to teach people how to sell the feeling of being new. Meanwhile, the budget did what budgets do when nobody respects them. It told the truth. The vacation fund sell started to look like a lie. The savings line was flat where it was supposed to be rising. The broker emailed a follow-up with 3 models. The only one we could safely choose meant scaling back on the renovations we'd already discussed. I forwarded it to her and got a heart emoji and the word later. I began writing dates beside transactions in a small notebook because ink makes its own case. I printed the joint account terms and highlighted 2 clauses that mattered if I ever needed them. I checked the limits and the release forms. She noticed the shift without understanding it. One Saturday afternoon, while she was swiping through photos from a rooftop mixer, I asked her to look at the 12-month projection if we maintained this rate of discretionary spend. She glanced at the chart and smirked. "If money is this stressful for you, maybe you should work more." I looked at the clock. I had worked more. That was the point. That night, she stayed out until 2:30. No call, just a text at 12:47 that said with friends and a heart. When she came in, I was awake without announcing it. She whispered something about ride shares and after something, slipped off her shoes, and drifted to bed. In the morning, she moved slowly and skipped the run we used to do together. I made coffee and didn't ask for explanations. I had all the explanations I needed, and none of them required her participation. I spoke one more time in the exact tone I use when a client is about to make a beautiful mistake. "We are not a brand. We are a household. We can't fund a public performance with private money without consequences." She set her cup down and smiled the kind of smile you give a stranger in a waiting room. "I don't need your approval to live my life." The mantra again, polished from use. The pressure peaked there because she didn't. Stone walls don't shout. They just refuse to move and wait for you to get tired. I watched her rewrite our marriage in captions and lighting, and I let the numbers keep their own light. I didn't slam doors or deliver speeches. I kept standing in the truth until it was solid under my feet. The house was quieter now, but I could hear the next step. It sounded like a decision forming its own edges. I wasn't confused. I was finished being erased. Precision beats volume. Monday morning, I made coffee, opened the laptop, and stopped treating our life like a debate. I treated it like a ledger. First call, the bank. I removed her as an authorized user on my primary card and asked for a new number. Second, I opened a separate checking account for my direct deposit and set up a lean, transparent household account that covered only fixed bills, mortgage, utilities, insurance. No extras. I left a modest buffer and turned off overdraft protection. If she wanted champagne, she could earn bubbles on her own dime. I exported 3 months of transactions and built the kind of exhibit you could put in front of a jury. Dates, merchants, categories, totals, a simple chart with a slope even a person allergic to math could feel. I printed it and slid it into a slim binder. No commentary, just numbers. I titled it Receipts because that's what it was. At lunch, I met with my financial advisor. We froze contributions to anything earmarked for optional projects and redirected them to an emergency fund in my name. I asked for a short written statement summarizing the risk of continued overspend on a fixed income. 2 paragraphs. Clear enough to forward without requiring translation. He didn't ask what had changed. I moved my streaming logins and shopping profiles off the shared email and changed the cloud storage password. I canceled the 2 memberships she'd signed us up for without discussing. A wine club that never shipped on time, and a lifestyle collective that billed like a utility. I wasn't unkind. I was thorough. At 4:10 p.m., my phone buzzed. Declined? She texted from a boutique across town. I didn't answer immediately. I set a new monthly transfer into the household account for groceries and gas. Fixed number, same day each month. Then sent a single line. We're protecting the plan. Use your card for personal purchases. She came home at 6:22 with the bag she didn't buy and the heat of public embarrassment still on her face. She held up the useless piece of plastic like a confiscated toy. What did you do? I kept my voice level. I don't need your approval to protect my future. Her mouth opened, closed, recalculated. You're controlling me. No, I'm containing risk. Mortgage and utilities are covered. Groceries are funded. Personal spending is personal. That's a boundary, not a cage. She laughed without humor. So you humiliate me at a register to make a point? I didn't humiliate you. A point of sale terminal did, because points and sales both require balance. She stormed down the hall. Doors did what doors do. I let the house neutralize the noise and put the binder on the counter where sunlight could do the work of a highlighter. I wasn't going to chase her into rooms anymore. I'd simply keep the facts where adults keep them, on the table. The next morning, I drove to meet her parents at a coffee shop halfway between their house and ours. I texted the night before. Want to give you a quick picture of our finances, nothing dramatic. They arrived with the concerned, pleasant faces of people who expect a routine update. I ordered all 3 coffees. When we sat, I opened the binder to a 1-page summary. Total household income, fixed costs, savings trend, discretionary explosion. I traced the slope with a finger. We had a plan. The plan is at risk. I'm taking steps at the bank to stabilize the essentials. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm making sure the story you hear matches the math. Here are copies if you want them. By noon, she knew I'd been there. Her text came in sharp. You ran to my parents? I replied with the same sentence I'd say to a client's board. I shared facts with stakeholders. Transparency is not betrayal. At work, I filed a change with HR to split deductions. More into my retirement, 0 into anything joint that wasn't contractually obligated. I reviewed the mortgage autopay and confirmed it now pulled only from the household account. I set an alert for attempts to add authorized users. Quiet guardrails. That evening, she tried the flank instead of the front. I came home to candles lit and dinner arranged like a sponsored post. She wore a silk top I knew was new. Her voice softened, an older version of her re-entering the room. Maybe we should reset. Later is how you bury a problem, I said, and set the binder beside her plate, open to the chart. I'm not punishing you. I'm acknowledging reality. We can talk about process, but the faucet is closed. She looked at the line again, really looked, and hated that it refused to bend under her gaze. Then she pivoted to posture. Fine. I'll tell everyone you're controlling and withholding. I'll tell them you cut me off. Tell them the part where the mortgage is paid and the lights stay on, I said. Tell them the part where personal spending became personal. Tell them I offered a plan and you chose a party. She pushed the chair back and left the food untouched. The house kept the plates warm the way ovens keep dishes ready for people who show up. I ate in silence and put the rest away. Day 3, she tried the bank. I got a fraud alert at 11:17 a.m. Someone attempting to add an authorized user. Denied. At 11:21 a.m., she called me, voice bright mean. You can't cut me out of my own life. I paused until the heat fell out of the line. You're not cut out. You're cut loose from my line of credit. The household account remains as agreed. If you need more than that, adjust your income, not my boundary. That night, I forwarded the advisor's 2-paragraph risk note to her inbox and CC'd myself. I attached the 1-page chart and the mortgage options from the broker. Subject, current reality. Body, I welcome a sustainable plan. My actions align with it. That was the whole email. Silence does a particular thing when it's not avoidance. It clarifies. She went quiet for a day and let her friends fill the space with big words and small understanding. Meanwhile, I canceled the refundable deposit on the after-salon weekend she had put on the calendar without telling me and redirected the refund to the mortgage principal. I sent her the confirmation. Paper trails do not argue. By week's end, the back-end mechanics were done. New card numbers. New direct deposit. Autopays organized like a clean tool bench. Housing, utilities, insurance, groceries. The household account ledger looked like a spine again. She confronted me in the kitchen with a different tactic. Eyes wet, hands open. I hate that you embarrassed me. We can fix it if you just trust me. Trust is built with receipts, not captions, I said, tapping the binder. When the numbers move, so will I. Until then, the gate stays closed. Her shoulders fell. For the first time in weeks, she didn't have a line ready. The shrug, her favorite weapon, didn't appear. She went to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch like a person in a waiting room who can't hear their name being called. I didn't gloat. Revenge wasn't fireworks. It was a dimmer switch turned to daylight. I'd made the calls, set the locks, opened the windows. I hadn't shouted, threatened, or begged. I'd done what I do best, made a plan, followed it, and left space for the truth to stand upright on its own. When I went to bed, the house felt like a ledger that had finally been reconciled. Tomorrow, there'd be consequences I couldn't control, friends peeling away when the freebies ran out, invitations evaporating when bills came due. For now, I had done the only work that mattered. I'd stopped funding the show and turned on the lights. Fallout came faster than I expected. The first tremor hit Saturday morning when her favorite boutique called the house looking for her. The owner's voice was polite but tight, a declined charge from last night, an outstanding balance from the stylist experience she'd booked for next week, and a reminder that their cancellation window wasn't a suggestion. I asked the owner to email everything to her directly. I didn't add commentary. I simply said, please send invoices to the party who made the purchases. The woman exhaled in relief, like she'd been waiting to hear an adult in the conversation. An hour later, my phone lit up with a stack of texts, hers. Screenshots of red notifications, a quick pivot to blame. You're trying to control me. Then the inevitable reach for shame. This is embarrassing. You're making me look poor. I put my phone face down and tightened a loose hinge on the pantry door. That was the theme of the day for me. Fixing things I owned and letting the broken things I didn't own collapse on their own. The panic phase arrived right on schedule. She started with soft power, lip gloss, and old memories, standing in the doorway of the guest room where I'd moved. She leaned there like the last 6 weeks hadn't happened. We don't have to be like this, she whispered. I stepped aside and let her see the duffel bag, the neatly folded spare sheets, the lamp I'd bought myself. A room that was simple, organized, mine. We already are like this, I said. And it's quiet. She stayed in the hall long enough to test whether silence was a tactic or a boundary. When I didn't move, she did. When seduction failed, she tried chaos. Stories started leaking through our circles. How I'd cut her off without warning. How I'd embarrassed her in front of friends. How I'd turned money into a weapon. The problem with telling a story in a small town is everyone keeps the receipts. The venue coordinator forwarded her the email thread showing I'd simply removed myself as the payer and added her as the responsible party. Our banker, who has known my family since I was a teenager, politely declined her request to reactivate the old settings. He attached the signed separation of finances she'd acknowledged. Even her friend who loves drama texted me a half apology. I didn't know it was that bad. People weren't suddenly on my side. They were just seeing straight lines where she'd been drawing circles. The bills caught up next. Memberships she'd opened under trial periods, subscriptions rung up against our address, deposits she'd offered on behalf of us without asking. I forwarded each invoice to her email with the same 3 words in the subject line. Please arrange payment. No threats, no, or else. Just the friction of adult choices meeting adult math. By Thursday, the person she'd been orbiting, some creative director, who always seemed to exist just out of explanation range, had unfollowed her on everything and blocked her number. I didn't need to know details. I only noticed the shift because she stopped performing for an audience and started pacing the kitchen like she lived there. What came after the panic was a smaller, uglier phase, bargaining with my time. She proposed short-term arrangements, like I was a winter sublet for her spending. Just until my next bonus hits, just to keep up appearances for the gala, just to get through this month. Every just came wrapped in something that used to work on me. Shared history, jokes only we understood, old photos that made the present look negotiable. I let each one pass. When she finally said, "You're being cruel," I looked at the stack of unopened packages she'd ordered when things started going bad, small luxuries like talismans against accountability, and answered as evenly as I knew how. I'm being consistent. Other people started telling her the same thing. Her boss pulled her aside after she missed a deadline and, according to her, delivered a lecture about priorities she wasn't planning to hear this year. Her sister, the one who used to cheer from the front row of every self-care idea, stopped by the house and sat with me on the steps after dropping off a box of her things. She didn't tell me I was right. She just nodded at the driveway where my car sat with tools in the trunk and said, "You look lighter." I didn't realize I did until she said it. Even the house reacted. Without constant deliveries and late-night glam squads, the place felt bigger, clutter-thinned. The fridge held food you could make a meal with instead of props for a story. I changed the Wi-Fi name from an inside joke to something practical and sent her the new password with the utilities she'd agreed to cover. She replied with a single word, "Noted," and that told me more than a paragraph ever could. The last move she tried was the meanest because it used sincerity like a weapon. She asked for counseling, not as a process but as a performance. 2 sessions to show the world we tried, a printed receipt for approval. I said no because therapy isn't a ritual for restoring reputation. It's work. And I was already doing mine, quietly, daily. She called me stubborn. I called it honest. If we walked into a room with a referee, I wasn't going to play the game she was requesting anymore. Some nights I still heard the soft click of the front door after midnight and felt the old impulse to wait up, to worry, to be the warm landing she'd never earned. That reflex had kept me trapped longer than any spreadsheet could measure. Now I turned off the lamp, locked the deadbolt, and went to bed. In the morning, I made coffee and took it to the back steps where the sun hit the railing just right. The jacket I'd started keeping there was a small ritual, but it reminded me that I didn't need a new life to have a different one. By the end of that month, the house had 2 climates. In mine, the air was clear, the list on the fridge was short, and the mirror didn't flinch. In hers, the calendar was a series of cancellations, and the inbox a stack of as discussed follow-ups. She looked at me one evening across the kitchen island like she was seeing a stranger who lived in the shape of her husband. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm the person I was before approval became a bill I kept paying with interest. Either way, her shrug finally met my silence and lost. The quiet after the storm is where I finally heard myself. No more reactive phone calls or late-night document scans. Just me at my kitchen table, my table now, signing the last set of instructions to my attorney, a neat stack of pages that turned everything loud into something final. The numbers were plain. The joint account closed, her networking charges assigned to her, the debt trail mapped cleanly back to the cards she loved waving at velvet ropes. I washed the pen ink off my hand, set a single mug on the drying rack, and felt the room breathe. That's the part people don't tell you about boundaries. When they're real, they don't feel like revenge. They feel like oxygen. Mediation sat on a rainy Thursday. She arrived in one of those rented dresses that moves like smoke under cameras, but the cameras were gone and the room was fluorescent. Her tone had softened since the day she shrugged and told me she didn't need my approval. Now it was careful, threaded with apologies that landed just short of ownership. We got off track, pressure from friends, I was just trying to grow. I listened the way you listen to a song you used to like that doesn't fit anymore. The mediator walked us line by line through reality. Numbers don't bend for feelings. Neither does respect. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to end this clean. She blinked like she expected a speech. I signed, pushed the folder forward, and watched a door close without needing to slam it. 2 weeks later, I moved the last box into my place. No gallery kitchen, no marble island. Just a good lock, morning light, and a quiet that didn't glare at me. I kept the things that worked and replaced the ones that pretended. New mattress. Solid dining chair that doesn't wobble under truth. I put the spare key on a hook labeled, "Only mine." Close friends started stopping by again. My brother helped me hang the heavy mirror. My dad called on Sundays without feeling like he had to pick sides. I changed beneficiaries, updated emergency contacts, and put my passport where it wouldn't be used as a prop in somebody else's reinvention. Small, deliberate moves. If you looked at my life from the street, you might have missed them. Living on the inside, they were tectonic. The fallout on her side wasn't my show, but pieces drifted across my feed anyway. The investor's dinner became a cash bar at a rented hall. The guest list shrank. The glossy posts turned into neutral quotes about healing and choosing yourself. The guy from the balcony disappeared after 3 loud weeks. A mutual friend texted that she'd been asking around about repairing the narrative. There it was again, the event language, even for a marriage. My reply was polite and contained, wishing her clarity. That was the first time I noticed that not replying felt better than any speech I could write. She asked for one more conversation. No lawyers, no parents, just us. I agreed to meet in a neutral place during daylight. Because I'm not allergic to closure. I just refused to buy it at a loss. She arrived early, eyes swollen in ways I'd never seen. She said she'd gotten carried away, that she missed us, that the house felt huge and hostile. I didn't ask about the new dresses or the minus sign in her account. We'd already litigated those. I told her the truth I'd been circling since the night. She shrugged at our budget and said she didn't need my approval. I'm not interested in being a prop. I'm a person with a life that runs on respect. She nodded like she heard it, then reached for my hand like muscle memory. I let the air sit between us. When I stood to leave, she whispered, "So that's it." I answered the only way that didn't turn me into the man I used to be. That's it. On the walk home, I noticed how different a street sounds when your head isn't crowded. My stride found its own cadence again. No checking my pocket for a buzzing phone. I stopped by a hardware store, bought a level and a small box of cabinet screws. The cashier looked at my little haul and said, "Weekend project?" I smiled. More like a life project. Back at the apartment, I fixed the one crooked shelf I'd been ignoring, then opened a window and let cool air change the room on its own schedule. Respect didn't return as a feeling. It returned as choices. I stopped replying to bait. I started sleeping. I lifted heavier and read in the early mornings, when the city is just bones and breath. I kept work steady and quiet. Good numbers, clean processes, no need to parade any of it for someone who thought approval was a trophy you hand out after midnight. I paid what I owed, to the dollar, and nothing beyond it. When friends asked for the story, I gave them the short version and moved the conversation to their kids, their jobs, their jokes. Detachment isn't bitterness, it's diet. You cut what starves you. News trickled in as paperwork turned into conclusions. The formal decree landed on a Tuesday with the terrible efficiency of certified mail. I ran my thumb over the embossed seal, put it in a manila folder labeled closed, and slid it into a drawer where I keep things that changed me. A week later, the venue company sent a final statement addressed only to her. The last of the chargebacks posted, the lounge memberships canceled, the late fees hers to hold. Somewhere in that, she texted a photo of a bracelet I'd once given her. "Do you want this back?" I stared at the screen a long minute and felt nothing. "Keep it," I wrote. "Or don't. Either way, it's not mine anymore." The only time our worlds crossed by accident was at a coffee shop near the old neighborhood. She was at a corner table with 2 women I recognized from the VIP stories, quieter versions of themselves. Our eyes caught for a heartbeat neither of us chased. She half-smiled the way you do at someone you used to know in a language you forgot. I nodded and ordered my coffee. On the way out, I heard the scrape of a chair and her voice starting my name. People keep asking me what I learned. I could dress it up with clever lines, but it's simple. Love without respect turns into management. Management turns into performance. Performance turns into debt. And debt, emotional, financial, spiritual, always comes due. The first and last job of a man who intends to keep himself is to set his rate and honor it. She said she didn't need my approval. She was right. She needed my partnership, my attention, my quiet labor under everything she built for display. When she understood that approval was never the thing I withheld, that respect was the thing she broke, there was nothing left to negotiate. I don't gloat over that. I carry it the way you carry a scar you stop poking, as proof that skin can close. I still pass the old venue sometimes on evening runs. The lights look the same. The crowd changes. Music does what it always does, promises weightlessness for a price. I keep moving, lungs burning clean, mind empty in a way I hadn't felt in years. At home, I shower, cook something simple, and set tomorrow's clothes out on the chair that doesn't wobble. Before bed, I open the window again and let the night settle on its terms.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.